Okay, welcome. And like I said, my apologies for the technical glitch. I will make sure that this does not happen again. Okay. So first, one little housekeeping item that is rather important. It's really, I'd like people to please understand that this is very broadly based. I'm talking to pretty much if you've got kids, grandkids, students, mechonachim, mentees, whatever, or if you are just for yourself concerned about the challenges, I hope this will be useful to you. However, it is really important to understand one thing, that is, if there are pathologies that you're having, such as addiction, you need professional help, because these things don't, once you run into a problem, all of this advice is good, but it's not enough to resolve these issues. Another thing I want to be clear here is what I mean when I'm talking about technology, because technology by itself is a very broad term. I mean, I've heard, the modern pencil being described as a feat of technology, and in a sense, it's true. But that's not really what we're worrying about here. What we're concerned about is the intersection between communications and information technology, which has especially exploded in the last 10 to 15 years. And this is what I'm really addressing. This subsection of technology presents some very strong challenges that we need to deal with. I'm trying to work with a welcome, and like I said, my apologies for the technical glitch. Okay, I will make sure that this does not happen again. Okay. So that's the baseline. That's the baseline I'm having here. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, you can feel free, whether you're in the YouTube live stream or here, you can type your questions in. You can unmute yourself to ask the questions. However, I would ask to wait till I'm done. I've scheduled this to allow some question and answer time at the end if you have any questions. The overall structure of this series, I will be covering most of what I'm planning to cover at a high level this time, and then over the next sessions, I will be going into more detail on each of these areas, and that's what it breaks down to. So the first thing I'd like to address here is simply the technological thing, and this is the thing I'm going to today spend the least amount of time on, but later I will spend the most of the time. That's the last three pieces of this series is going to be on the specifics of technology. As a starting point on a high level, what is important to keep in mind is two things. One is there are a lot of very, very effective tools. You really should use them. You really should use them. They are, like I said, they're effective. Nothing is 100% effective, but even 90% or 80% is really useful. It's like, and I'm going to use this analogy a bit because it's not perfect, but it is helpful. It's like a car, car seats and seat belts and, airbags, whatever. None of these things work 100% of the time, but they are extremely useful. They do work often enough that it is well worth making the investment in having these things. So that is the first thing that's really, really important to keep in mind when you are talking about technology. Use the tools. There are a lot of tools out there. No one tool is the be-all and end-all, but if you use a judicious set of tools, you can make an enormous difference in how you get this stuff done, in how you protect yourself, your children, both begashmi and beruchnius. There's a lot here. Okay. The second thing is you need to have, unless your profession, like my profession is computer technology, that's what I do. Okay. But if that's not your job, there's no way for you to know everything there is to know about technology and its dangers. So you want to learn about this stuff, but then you also want to find some resources that you can reach out to for information. Whether it's somebody like me to be able to call, there are forums online, there are many, many resources that you can use, and you need to figure out what works for you. It's extremely, extremely important. It's like anything else. Medical stuff, we all know, you talk to a doctor. Legal stuff, you talk to a lawyer. A lot of us have mashpiyim. Hopefully everybody has a rub. Life is that way. Nobody knows everything about anything really. So you need to find the resources for something this important. You need to find the resources to help you navigate all of this stuff. Okay. The second really big area of technology is, how do we deal with technology? There tends to be a tendency, and you see this not only in the firm world, but there's talk about virtual reality, and that's over here, and real reality is over there, and it's two separate things, and the rules are different, and it's all different, etc. And the reality is that's not the case. Virtual reality, so to speak, and real reality are one thing. Technology is part of our lives, and our lives touch technology in many ways. Technology touches our lives in many ways, and you can't separate it out. Many years ago, I attended a session by somebody who was, this was when everybody was just talking about just the internet, which no longer is the only thing we talk about. And one of the comparisons he made was to the migration to America. And he makes a very, very good point. Lubavitchers all know the Friedrich came, and he said, America is nicht anders. What was he saying? America was very different than Europe in many, very, many very significant ways, and in ways that the Rebbe himself, adapted to, used, etc. But what was he saying? He was saying something very important. And by the way, although the Rebbe was the only one who said those particular words, this was an attitude that every kehillah that succeeded had. What was he talking about? People would say things like, you'd say, okay, you have to keep Shabbos. Shabbos is important. And people say, America is anders. You can't keep Shabbos. You don't need to keep Shabbos because of this, that, the other. There are always reasons why America is anders, and therefore you don't need to do this, or you can't do that. You can't keep kosher. You can't keep Shabbos. You can't this, you can't that, whatever. And the reality is that, no, America is nicht anders. You can keep Shabbos. You can keep kashrus. You can do shmiras halashon, etc., etc. You can be a frum yid even in America. America is not some place that you cannot be a frum yid. And the same thing is true on the internet and using technology and on smartphones. Just because it's a smartphone doesn't mean that the rules don't apply. And it doesn't mean that you cannot follow those rules. Okay. Certain pragmatic things may be different, but Lashon Hara is Lashon Hara, and Shmiras Hanayim is Shmiras Hanayim, and Ehrlichkeit is Ehrlichkeit, etc. And I can go through the list of all the different things that technology can be a problem with. And the bottom line is that all of these things can be dealt with, but you have to be ready, willing, and able to make the effort and figure out how to do it. And that is a really, really key piece. And again, part of that key piece is understanding that this is not a different, separate piece of the picture. Okay, it's like, well, I don't talk during davening except for looking at my cell phone. That doesn't work. I would never use that kind of language, when I'm sitting at work, but I can use that kind of language, on an email or on some forum. That's not the way it works. What you say and how you speak and how you think cannot be different online and offline, on your cell phone, off your cell phone, etc. It's all one thing. You are the one person, and what you do is you, whether it's online, offline, smartphone, whatever. It doesn't really matter, whatever technologies you're using. Another really, really important thing to keep in mind is we have Bechir. And this is a really big problem. There tends to be this attitude, this idea, this fear that, oh, technology like makes you do these things. With technology, these terrible things will happen, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is we have Bechir. We have Bechir, but so that's the first piece of it. But the other piece of that is that we need to be conscious about the choices we make. We need to think about it. Do I get a smartphone or not? Not everybody has a smartphone. And there are good, I'm not going to say don't get smartphones, but you should think about it. Do I want a smartphone? Is it really going to give me more than it's not going to give me? Say I get a smartphone. How do I use it? What do I put on there? What kind of filters do I do? At each step, we have choices to make, from the first decision of do I get this, that, or the other technology to how do I use it? How do I protect myself in the moment, etc. And what's really important here is to set ourselves up to encourage us to make good choices, right? So for instance, I very often recommend that people do not put Facebook. You have a Facebook account, that's fine, but don't put it on your phone. Why? Because putting Facebook on your phone makes it more likely that you're going to post something without really thinking it through, and posting something that if you really thought about it, you would realize is not such a great idea, right? So that's a choice you made in the first place to not put it on your phone, so that that's not a guarantee that you'll never post something that you shouldn't post, but it helps you make the right choice. But at the same time, at the next step, before you hit post, before you hit send, before you click that button, you have to be conscious. You have to, my father, Altslang, used to say, "A chassid halt kop," right? I was just reading an article about, I don't remember his name, Rosh Hashiva in Gateshead, who his children, after his patira, found, his achlotas from Rosh Hashanah. And one of his achlotas was that he would do nothing, not even stretch out his hand without thinking about it first, which, I mean, most of us are not anywhere near that level. But the idea is that you have to think about what you're doing, okay, before you just, and that's true. Doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter when, it doesn't matter whether you're using technology or not. And that's, again, it's an attitude issue. And are we all perfect? No. But again, the more times, if you make 100 choices a day and you make 90% of them, you do the right thing, you're doing pretty well. If you have those 10 interactions without thinking about them, those 100 interactions without thinking about them, then you know what? You're not going to get 10 of them wrong. You're probably going to get 50 of them wrong. So that's really what's important. And if you don't set yourself up correctly, you'll probably get even more of them wrong. So, each piece, so if you set yourself up to only get 50 of them wrong, that's already an improvement from, the 80 you would probably get wrong if you didn't, that's the kind of thing. So you really need to really think about the fact that we have choice, we have the fear, and we have to use it. We have to be mindful and thoughtful and make the right choices about how we use technology. Again, I get it. Nobody, most of us don't make the right choice 100% of the time, but the more we think about it, the more we are thoughtful and mindful, the more likely we are to get it right. Okay. Now, how do you make the choices? Well, before you even get to that point, there is, and this is why I mentioned about chinuch, but it's not just about what we teach our kids or our students, et cetera. We need to have certain attitudes in order for us to be able to really get it right. Okay. So, and, obviously, most of these things are also things that apply to the rest of our lives. But again, like I said, technology is not a separate thing from the rest of our lives. But what I'm focusing on are issues and areas that have the most, that are the most important. Because if I'm going to talk about all the different things that we need to think about as from Jews, I'll never end. I'm trying to focus on the things that are most directly linked to how we use technology and how we keep safe. So the first most important thing is, it says in Shulchan Aruch, Shivisi Hashem l'neg yisamed, b'chol drachecha de'ehu, einoid milvado. You have to always remember that the Eibishter is around. He sees, he hears, etc. The internet technology actually provides a very good metaphor for that, because you think you can hide whatever, and the internet remembers that, that's a line of the internet remembers, etc. Just because you're on the internet doesn't mean, or you're using a smartphone, and oh yes, but I'm smart, I'm using a VPN and et cetera. I don't mind the technical language here, but people sometimes think that they can hide on the internet, or they can hide using smart technologies. And you know what? Maybe you can hide from people, but you can't hide from Hashem. Okay? You cannot hide from Hashem. Eino Milvado, he's there. And there's no exceptions for technology. That's the most fundamental thing that any person can remember, because sometimes the temptation is like, who's going to know? Well, you know what? Who's going to know? They're just going to know. Okay. Then there are some broad issues that build on top of that. Number one is Ehrlichkeit. I am going to tell you that, especially on the Gashmistic side, but even on the Ruchnistic side, one of the things that makes you the most vulnerable once you get past the issue of who's going to know is a lack of Ehrlichkeit. There are whole genres of scams that work on the idea that people are dishonest, and that's how they hook people in. And then they make it hard for people to get out, because they now have this information on you that you don't want to get out. Ehrlichkeit, if you see it, if you hear it, if you are Ehrlich, you're going to be less likely to get involved in stuff. But also, if that's something you really feel very strongly, you're more likely to recognize the lack of it. And most of the danger is Gashmis and Baruchnius. There is a level of that in there. There is a lack of Ehrlichkeit 9 times out of 10 in the most dangerous things and places. And if you can recognize that lack of Ehrlichkeit before you recognize anything else and say, I want nothing to do with it. This person may have wonderful ideas and be brilliant and all the rest of it, but I want nothing to do with lack of Ehrlichkeit. You will protect yourself from an enormous, enormous amount of scammy and, dangerous, etc. Things. The second thing is humility. You need to know what you don't know. You need to know that you can make a mistake. You need to know that you just don't know everything. And along with that, you need to be willing not only to know this for yourself, but to admit it and to ask a question. Again, whether it's about the technology or about, you're on a forum and somebody starts spouting off that this is the halacha and you never heard this before and you're not sure, and this other person sounds like they're so knowledgeable. You need to be able to ask her up, right? It's the same. And by the way, it's not just about asking her up, but that's, you need to ask a lawyer, ask a doctor, ask, whatever. You need to be able to say, I need to be able to ask a question without being embarrassed. And it's really, really interesting. There are studies that show that doctors have a very, very high, relative to the rest of the population, percentage of falling prey to scams. I'm not saying every doctor does that. I'm not saying even most, but as a percentage of the population, they have a surprisingly high percentage. And you would think it would be the other way, because doctors are intelligent people who are well-educated. How does this happen? And the reason it happens is because very often they're used to being the smartest person in the room. And so they think that they know more about finances, law, whatever, areas that they're really not that well educated than they do. They think they know more than they do, and they therefore don't ask for advice and for help, and they don't run it by other people who are more expert, and that's how they get in trouble. Now, again, we're still talking about relatively small percentages, but it's very interesting to see that when you compare it to other groups of people, it's an interesting thing. And these are people, like I said, who are used to being the smartest person in the room, and also just like being the one who makes that decision and takes that and has to learn to trust their own instinct and their gut, etc. And, sometimes you need to say, okay, but you know what? This is an area I know about, but this is an area I don't know about. And even in medicine, the best doctors really know when they need to get a second opinion. It's hugely important to be able to admit and understand that. On the flip side, critical thinking is very important. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen stuff posted that I can look at that and I say, like, really? Now, I don't always know whether it's true or not. Again, I don't know everything, but some things don't add up. Like there are internal inconsistencies. This doesn't square with things that this person has said before. This doesn't square with other things I've seen. Something's wrong. And again, what I do in those cases depends on how important it is. Sometimes we'll just, go on with life. But what I will do, if it's something that's important, I will then go back, because again, I know that I don't know everything. So I'm not going to just say, oh, this must be wrong. Because you know what, sometimes it smells wrong and it turns out that it's right. I was wrong. But it's important to be able to look at something and think about what is happening, what is being said here, and does this make sense? Is it right? Does it add up? Again, all this I'm sure everybody's heard the terms misinformation and disinformation. Both of these live on people who don't stop to think, hey, does this make sense? Does this fit? Does this match what I have seen? Does this match the things I've learned, etc.? Okay. And it's important. It's really, really important, and the more riled up you are, it's an interesting thing. Most misinformation, disinformation experts tell you that 9 times out of 10, the more riled up you are by what you're seeing, the higher the chance that there's something not entirely straight there, that, there's probably something that you need to dig into. Again, it's not 100%, it's not even 90%, but, the thing that you say, okay, whatever, and you go on, is less likely to be an agenda that somebody's pushing, where the thing that's getting you riled up, that's done often deliberately because, somebody wants you to get riled up and therefore share it and do something about it, etc. And B, it kind of shuts down your thinking. Now, of course, good marketers and good fundraisers, LaMarshall, etc., will rile people up also for a good purpose. And I'm not saying the fact that you're riled up, but the point is that as riled up as you get, you need to be able to step back and say, okay, is this something I should be riled up about? Is this correct? Is this right? Etc. It's very, very important. Okay. Another really important thing is impulse control. And the ability to just think through what are the likely consequences of clicking this button, doing this thing, saying this thing, and setting yourself up. And again, this is what I was talking about, choices before, setting yourself up so that you're less likely to run into problems. So again, to use the example, putting Facebook on your smartphone, if you realize that, it's too easy to post stupid stuff on Facebook, right? So the smart person says, okay, it's the reason it's too easy to post stupid stuff on Facebook is because it's too easy to post on Facebook. So I'm going to put a little friction in there so that it gives me a chance to really think about what's going to happen. But then you have to really think about it. When you get that chance, you need to think about it. You need to kind of, and we teach kids, but for ourselves also. I'm not saying that every time we do something impulsive, it's a bad thing. But again, many of the troubles people get into are because, no, I didn't think. I didn't think is the classic line. And very often there are other things that people say that basically come down to I didn't think. So try not to be the victim of your own I didn't think. Okay. The other two things are, it's just incredible to me how often I see things and it's like, did you not learn, about the halachas of Lashon Hara, about Motzi Shemra, about Einos Devarim? Like, why are you posting this thing? Why are you sharing this thing, right? And it's really important because again, people talk about getting, things going viral, et cetera, et cetera. This is a responsibility to myself because if this is something that shouldn't be posted, if it's Motzi Shemra, if it's Einos Devarim or whatever, that's a halachic problem, But it also, it makes us part of the problem of other people who get ensnared in all of these things. And the same thing is Shmir Sanayim, making Gedarim for yourself, looking, and it's not just for guys, it's not, you have to think about, is this a place where I want to be? Are these, images that I want to be seeing? And, is this a group I want to be in? Will I join groups who, even even, you know what, I don't necessarily join every professional group that is relevant to me, because some of them have, you know, they may have good professional stuff, but there's also stuff there that is just not in consonant with our values, and I don't want to be there. I don't want to be constantly hearing this stuff, you know, every day, you know, when I log into my groups, etc. And each person has their, you know, needs to know what their Nekutas HaBechira here is. They need to know, like, what are the things, what are the Gedarim that I'm going to make for myself that makes sense? Whether, you know, again, and it goes, you know, together with the choices. You know, do I not get a smartphone? Do I get, you know, do I go to tag and have somebody else kind of oversee that for me? Do, you know, like, what groups do I join? Or even things like, do I post pictures of other people without permission? Now, my feeling is you should never, ever, ever post a picture of another person without their permission. And posting pictures of children 3 times over, okay? You know, that's just one example. But there is about what I expose myself to and what I expose others to for myself. And this is extremely, extremely important. So that is really the, like, up a high level, so to speak, of what the overall, how to put this. This is the overall approach to dealing with technology that I have seen both in my work, because you know what, there is a huge, again, because technology and our lives are not different, you know, when I look at my work, the things that put us as an organization, I talk to education. You know, I've worked in the past with educators, and by the way, not just from educators. Okay, you know, anybody who's paying attention realizes there are issues here, and time again, these are the things that I see show up, and the studies bear them out. You know, the security researchers studies bear them out. The postmortems, as they call them, you know, when there are breaches and problems, etc., bear this out. It happens again and again and again. These are the kinds of things that you need to, from on the technology end through to the just fundamental, you know, attitudes and where you're coming from and how you behave. You know, these are the things. And I'm going to say that other than the one thing that I said, that you have to recognize that ein od milvado, and that holds true everywhere, including, you know, when you use your technology, and that your technology is not separate from the rest of your life. No one of these things is more important than the other. The technology tools for safety are hugely important. They can literally be life-saving, but at the same time, the behavior, the attitude and behavior is also crucial. And again, to use a car analogy, it's like, you know, seatbelts and airbags are lifesavers. But if somebody is being an idiot, okay, if somebody is letting their, you know, emotions get the better of them, they decide not to follow the rules, they get mad and try to chase somebody or whatever, they can get themselves into huge trouble anyway, even with the seatbelt, even with the airbags. So you need both. If you really want to have a good shot at keeping safe, you need to do both. You need to have the attitude and the behavior, and you need to have the tools. Okay. If anyone has any questions, you can either put them in the comments or you can unmute yourself. Okay. Any questions? I'm just checking all of the different incoming. Okay. Okay. So it looks like there are no questions. So I'm going to say a couple of things. First of all, the next session will be next week, same time, Monday at 8:30 p.m. Again, we'll be recording this. I will post it. I will post it to YouTube. And if somebody wants a link, that I'll send those out as well. The other thing I just want to say on a general note is that I had mentioned I was talking about using tools. To some extent, in my experience, using the tools is in a sense a behavioral thing also. It's like, who uses seatbelts? I actually know people who literally put in the seatbelt and sit down on it, whatever. It's a certain attitude issue, okay? But so, that's a really, really important thing. But so that's one thing. But it's important. Using the tools is important. Not using, not using a filter for yourself is like getting into your car and not making sure your brakes work. It's that kind of thing. And if you're dealing with kids, that's 10 times over. But again, even for yourself, it's really, really important to recognize that no matter how careful you are, no matter how firm you are, no matter how smart you are, none of us is perfect. We all make mistakes. And there are a lot of very smart, very, very not good people out there who actually may be smarter than you, or maybe they're smarter in how to ensnare you. And therefore, as much as I'm talking about the behavior, like I said, you need both. I really, really want to emphasize this because I see a lot of people who, get into this, well, it's not perfect, and you can bypass it like this, and you can bypass it like that. And, some of that's true, but you still should use the tools. The other thing I want to mention about bypassing technology, I hear a lot of, oh, they really don't work. Any 15-year-old kid can crack it and hack it and spack it. And you know what? It is not true. It's easy to say that, and our kids are so brilliant, whatever. It's not true. Okay. Security is something that I deal with every day as part of my job. And I know where the holes are, et cetera. And believe me, we've been attacked. We've had, people, but there's a reason. There is a reason why this stuff is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I see that somebody asked me if I'm going to be discussing practical technological tools. Absolutely. And I will be discussing how to reduce the risk for kids. First of all, everything that I am saying now applies to us as adults and to our kids. Now, the next session is going to be what parents and teachers, et cetera, need to think about before even, going to the rest of it. After that, I'm going to be talking about, again, some of these attitudes, et cetera. And the reason is because, as I said earlier on, the way we think, the way we approach, the way we deal with technology truly makes a difference in how much of at risk we and our kids are. And I'm going to talk about that very directly. I'm not going to just talk about, whatever, I'm going to talk specifically about how these things tie in. The last 3 sessions is going to be about tools specifically. But before you get to tools, because, choosing tools, you need to have a background, and I don't mean like a 10-year background, but you have to have some idea of what's going on before you can actually choose the tools, implement them in a way that's useful and helpful rather than just, performative or, I check these boxes and, it doesn't really matter. Any other questions? Now, by the way, as far as the Tech for Kids is concerned, on my channel, there are the two webinars that I had done almost 2 years ago now, when all this started and parents were handing their kids, devices right, left, and center to get online school, et cetera. Now, some of the particular tools some of that is not really relevant anymore, but the first one is completely still relevant. The second one, about half of it is, because I talk about how the tools work in general, and then I talk about specific tools. Those are not as useful because it's 2 years. Things have changed immensely. I mean, just take an example of Zoom. 2 years ago, I refused to do a Zoom meeting like this because there were a major number of security issues, which today they've managed to mostly get around. So it's a whole different kettle of fish. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, any other questions? Okay, if you have a question, if you want to type it in, if you want to unmute yourself, feel free. If nobody has any questions, I'm not going to keep everybody, and we will reconvene next week, and hopefully we will not have any technical glitches. I really apologize for that, and I hope everybody has an excellent week. Okay. I'm putting my email address in the comments. Okay. And I'm putting it in both sets of comments. Okay. So you've got my email. You can, a number of you have my phone number. You can WhatsApp me, fine. Are there tools? Kind of, and that is something I will talk about filtering in the tools. It depends on your phone. It depends on your phone service. But yeah, basically what you're looking for here is spam filters. And the spam filters are primarily email related, but some carriers will do spam filtering, and that's really one of the most common issues that crops up. But there are links to either videos that you absolutely don't want to be there, and to other sites that again you don't want to be there because they're scams, etc. I am going to say, nevertheless, again, because nothing is 100%, you want to have the filtering, and you also want to have a regular video filter so that you have like as they call belt and suspenders. But I will talk about filtering when I talk about the specific tools. They definitely help. On my phone, I've got the spam filtering, and it alerts me when it puts something to spam, and I cannot tell you how many of those are these links from I don't know who, and I do not want to know who. Okay, so yeah. So next week's session is, like I said, the prerequisites as a parent, teacher, mechanech, rebbetzin, mentor, whatever. What are the things that set you up to be successful? Because I see this all the time where parents tell me my kids don't want to listen to me. They don't believe me. They think they know better than me. I hear this from kids who, or even not kids, who are like, they just roll their eyes when their teacher or their mentor or whatever says something, and there's a reason. Most of the time there's a reason why it happens. And so I want to talk about, like, how do you set yourself up for being somebody who the people you're talking to will pay attention to. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop recording, and if anyone has a question after that, they can ask, and if nobody has any further questions, I will shut down. Okay, so I hope to see you guys next week, 8:30 Monday night, 8:30 p.m. And everybody should have a good Chodesh and a good week. Like